great.
All right, we
Here we
are
go.
recording.
Awesome.
Welcome to Reclaiming the Wisdom of America. This is a presentation inviting us into unity on the social level. That doesn't mean we're all gonna have the same thoughts, but it means we're gonna be able to come together. And that's a beautiful thing. Honoring that not everyone is going to 100% think the same thing. So there we have it. I'm Ann Nicholson, and I am a social scientist, in fact, a member of the North American section on social science. I am in California, and I am going to be like your tech host, and your other hosts and presenters include Hazel Archer-Ginsberg, Rosemary McMullen, Sally Greenberg, Ann Dale, and Stewart Lundy. So we welcome you. And now we're going to have a verse to get us started.
This is Walt Whitman's Leaves of Grass. As I sat alone by blue Ontario's shore, as I mused of these mighty days and of peace returned and the dead that returned no more, a goddess, gigantic, superb, with humble visage accosted me. Chant me a poem, it said, that comes from the soul of America. Chant me the carol of victory and strike up the marches of Liberdad, marches more powerful yet, and sing me before you go the songs of the throes of democracy.
Thank you, Sally. Beautiful. Yes, friends, if you could mute yourself now, we're going to begin our presentation. Thank you for that beautiful verse. Walt Whitman was really living into trying to see what the spirit of America was about. And yeah, greetings, friends. Now that we've begun to get a little hindsight with our 2020 vision, how can we read between the lines to develop keen insight into the deep core, beyond the cause and effect, into the individual and collective karma of our current world crisis, right? We can't be the passive ones, letting the blind lead the blind, or the Pollyanna people, right? We don't want to be the doomsayers. So how can we stand in our uprightness with clear vision, like Joan of Arc, to say, I am not afraid. I was born to do this. Then we will be open to receive divine influences that await our participation. So yeah, the one thing we can always count on is change. I remember in my youth, I often lamented about, how much better things used to be in the past, or, back then, or, in ancient times, more pastoral, more pure, more spiritual. Maybe this was a past life peeking in, I don't know, but yeah, it's a great value to learn from the past, but we can never stay there. We must adapt, we must grow, we must evolve. So change is a constant, and it's not always neat, it's not always kind. So, but the question is, how do we live into our evolution? How do we manifest change? How we do that, it's up to us. And we certainly don't want to repeat the past mistakes of the sins of the fathers, right? We don't want to, create genocide or devastate or perpetuate war, or, we want to name these things so that we can move beyond them. So we know that in the process of our unfolding, sometimes we make mistakes. And so we don't want to blame, we don't want to shame, we don't want to separate into factions. Anne said, we don't want to create single issue platforms either. I mean, that's the old way. The question is, can we evolve into what the age of the consciousness souls calls for, what the time spirit Michael represents, which is part of the mission of America, to be cosmopolitan. Now, what does that mean? Well, for me, it can be seen in the ideal of what we say when we call America the melting pot, where all the people, the ideal, right, is that all the people make up the folk spirit of a nation and that they are all free and equal. So what resources can we draw on? How can we inspire, conspire? Yeah, I'm using some analogies of breathing here. So because we have to breathe new life into the possible future for ourselves, for each other, for our America, for Gaia, our Mother Earth, in harmony with the spiritual beings of the universe that seek to work with us. So we'll be taking a little peek behind the lines of history, so that we can renew a hidden essence that holds the key to healing. We're going to heal. We want to heal the past. We want to heal the present, and we want to move forward with focused will. So yeah, what, dear friends, is the history that we will write for 2021? And how can we exert our wisdom fortified free will to create a reality that brings out the best in all humanity, while also applying graceful ways of riding the waves that we keep continuing to be bashed with, as well as guiding these tides of destiny. So yeah, today our work it's Sunday, right? It's the Sunday after the inauguration, which we can see, as a start, not only of a new week, but of a new impulse in America. Why not? Let's just use it to awaken our dormant willpower by aligning us with the impulse of the divine feminine that greatly informed us in the past and who awaits those who can hear the true call of freedom, the clarion call to we the people who will to reclaim and renew, each in our own way, our spirit of place, and build together a divine destiny where the being of America is healed and made whole. So that's what we're going to do today. We're going to start that conversation, right? We're going to go deep and we're going to go wide. And yeah, I may be talking too much here. I'm sorry, but I have a lot to cover, and it may be too dense for some, and others may wish that, I went into something further. But, I just want to say that our team really sees this as the beginning to a conversation that each of us must add to. So that being said, among other things, we will explore the concept from spiritual science of the folk spirit of America, as seen from the perspective of the native peoples, as well as those who came here to escape oppression, including the vision of the founding fathers, inscribed through the symbols of Freemasonry in the Capitol. And we're going to ask, what do we do? How do we renew the being of America for our age of the consciousness soul? For we are meant to prepare now for the unveiling of the new Isis-Sophia, which will have its full expression in the seventh epoch of the future, so that we might fulfill the true destiny of America, which plays a significant role in that coming age. So yeah, it's really the present that we have to unwrap, isn't it? So yeah, today let's broadcast seeds of this intention out into the ethers. Let's consecrate this etheric realm. Let's look up, let's look down, let's look in, let's look out, and let's follow the clues that are etched into the land itself, the empty furrows that sound out from the urban food deserts, crying for amber waves of grain to be reaped, not weeped, right? In biodynamic fields, alive with cosmic and earthly forces. We can till the soil of our hearts by taking up the torch of enlightenment given to us by spiritual science to blaze a trail into regeneration. So yeah, we're still in the glow of Martin Luther King Jr. Day, right? All the celebrations. Our friends at Elderberries did a wonderful job of bringing some energy of the threefold social organism to bear on that day. And to me, it's like part of the reason we celebrate this is to remind us that, one individual with a vision, working with the spiritual worlds, can have an impact and inform the course of history to affect world karma. So I'd like to begin by painting a picture of a little known individual that upheld the torch of liberty, despite spending much of her life as a slave. A woman who was the vessel for the folk spirit of America, who through her writing awoke that spirit in others. Phyllis Wheatley. Well, she was the first African and only the second woman ever to publish a book of poems in America. Amazing. So Phyllis Wheatley's writing style, it really embraced the African heritage, where it was the role of women to tell stories and sing as part of the festival rites. And so she brought these gifts to America. And throughout the American Revolution, Phyllis used her artistic talent to actively oppose slavery. She wrote several pieces on liberty and freedom and sent them to ministers and to others in positions of power. So during the peak of her writing career, she wrote a well-received poem predicting the appointment of George Washington as the commander of the Continental Army. Now, we have to remember that at the start of the American Revolution, George Washington was considered old. He had already retired from the army and had said no to being the commander. So her poem, entitled "To His Excellency General Washington," helped to convince him to take up the reins once again. And then, of course, he went on to be the first president of the United States of America. So Phyllis Wheatley's prophetic poem also gave name to the inspiration that was uniting and driving the colonies towards independence. And it begins by calling in the guiding folk spirit of America, who she calls Columbia. So I'd like to invite Sally Greenberg to come back and read this quote for us.
Celestial choir, enthroned in realms of light, Columbia's scenes of glorious toils I write. While freedom's cause her anxious breast alarms, she flashes inspiration in refulgent arms. See Mother Earth, her offspring's fate bemoan, and nations gaze at scenes before unknown. See the bright beams of heaven's revolving light, standing up to sorrows and veil of night. The goddess comes, she moves divinely fair, olive and laurel bind her golden hair. Whenever shines this native of the skies, unnumbered charms and recent graces rise.
Thank you. Yeah. So after these opening stanzas, the poem goes on to give a prediction of the impending meeting between Columbia and Britannia, the spirit of England. So you can see there's many different ways that the media was showing this meeting. You know, sometimes they're hugging their comrades, other times they're fighting separate. So it's interesting to look at how this meeting was depicted. And I love this one. It's called The Men of Business. And I want to just read, it's hard to see what's on the bottom there, but Columbia says, "Ah, dear, if your man of business had only been less mealy-mouthed." And then Britannia says, "Yes, dear, and if your man of business had been less smart, we should have settled this matter pleasantly enough." So here are these two spiritual beings ready to do whatever they have to do, and the men of business kind of plotting and doing their thing. So I just thought to share that it was interesting. But besides this meeting, her poem shares a vision of a cosmic alignment that would determine the climax of the war. When, and this is a quote, "The scales of Libra are held aloft by Jupiter." Now, many of us have been paying attention to this conjunction that we've been experiencing over the holy night. So here she is, she's naming something here. So in this poem, Phyllis really describes the scales tipping, the side of Britannia sinking down, the British attack crushed. And that is just what happened on October 19th, 1781 at Yorktown. That was the decisive victory that was assisted by the French army. And it just occurred at exactly that moment when the planet Jupiter, symbol of the benevolent ruler, was in the constellation of Libra, the zodiac sign pictured as Lady Justice holding the scales. So, spiritual science tells us that, in ancient times, human beings were able to speak with the stars, interpreting the signs revealed in the alignments between the planets and constellations, between human beings. So it seems that Phyllis still had that gift of reading the starry script. And also interesting to note that the founding fathers, when they designed and built the Capitol, used sacred geometry in alignment with the stars. In particular, the constellation Virgo, symbol of the divine feminine. So Phyllis Wheatley's poem concludes with a petition to serve the goddess and a vision of the honors that Washington would receive as a consequence of his faithfulness to Columbia's service. Sally, is this for you to read? No, this is for me. She says, "Proceed, great chief, with virtue on thy side. Thy every action let the goddess guide. A crown, a mansion, and a throne that shine with gold unfading. Washington, be thine." I just love, if you get a chance, read the whole poem. It's amazing. I just love it that she really captures this imagination of the folk soul of America, that it really works through her to reach Washington. It affected him deeply and turned the tide in his decision to take up the call of Columbia. He replied and actually invited her to come to Cambridge to visit him and recite her poems at the command post of the Continental Army, which he had decided to take charge of. So, and we have to have some insight into George Washington too, because he's not like the leaders today. He was a very, very humble man. Even though he was a high-ranking Freemason, he shied away from all the accolades, and he didn't want to call attention to himself that way. And yet, people were compelled to build many monuments to him. and to the spirit of America that he served. For instance, we have this 333-foot George Washington Masonic National Memorial. I was there. It's amazing. And it's fashioned after the ancient lighthouse of Alexandria in Egypt. So here we see there's many, many depictions of Washington as a Freemason. And here he is laying the foundation stone of the Capitol building, on which the statue of the Spirit of Freedom stands in her visage as an Indian queen. And we're gonna talk about that in a little bit. But this fresco, it's amazing. It's high up in the eye of the rotunda of the US Capitol building, which was recently under siege, right? Interesting. So it's right underneath the statue. And it's called the Apotheosis of Washington. And it depicts Phyllis Wheatley's prophetic vision of George Washington as the father of our country, rising to the heavens in glory, you know, flanked by these female figures representing liberty and victory, and encircled by the whole zodiac, representing the spirits of the original 13 colonies, looking down from the starry firmament. So apotheosis, it's not a word we hear every day, right? It means, you know, the perfect example. It's like achieving elevation to divine status. And of course, it's interesting to note that there's a legend of the apotheosis of Hercules, right? So there's an obvious comparison here, which depicts the gods and goddesses of Olympus gathering for the arrival of Hercules after his successful labors rise him to the rank of God. Yeah. So, you know, without giving away any secrets of Freemasonry, we can see that there's something going on here. So you can notice this direct line from the goddess herself connecting to the apotheosis of Washington through the chambers of the House of Representatives and the Senate. And it connects all the way down to the sub-basement where Washington's tomb and Lincoln's pyre once stood. So here's some close-ups. This is Columbia. She's in the rainbow at his feet, and she's holding the sword of freedom. And this is Minerva. She's the goddess of wisdom, right? She holds the arts of civilization. And Circe's, the goddess of agriculture. Yeah. So, right, e pluribus unum. Who out there grew up with the Wizard of Oz? Right? What a revelation to grow up and then discover that e pluribus unum means out of many, one. And it originates from the concept that out of the union of the 13 colonies emerged a new single unified nation. So this Latin phrase, it was actually the motto of the United States, appearing on the Great Seal for many years. But then in 1956, Congress just got rid of it and adapted "In God We Trust" as the official motto and printed it on the almighty dollar bill. So the Washington Monument, it's located, if you go down to DC, you have to check these things out. It's just magical. It's right at the center of the National Mall between the US Capitol and the Lincoln Memorial. And it was once the tallest building in the whole world, 555 feet. Okay, these numbers mean things, folks, right? So the monument to America's first president, it still holds the title of the tallest stone obelisk. So I guess you could say that Phyllis Wheatley's prophecy of George Washington came true. And some speculate that George and Phyllis worked together in a previous incarnation during the Egyptian times. Interesting to contemplate, especially because, I mean, if you look all around, there's this Egyptian architecture all over Washington, right? They knew, you know, these were power spots in the world. And the Freemasons knew that what spiritual science tells us, that we are now in a kind of recapitulation of ancient Egypt, which was the third cultural epoch. So we're kind of repeating that. And so, yeah, these buildings, these monuments are tapping into this ancient power. But we can't let it just lay there as it is. We have to renew it. So we're going to end this exploration of the connections with Phyllis Wheatley, all these things that she brought with this quote, which Ann Dale will share for us. Can you guys hear her?
Answer no, do not hear.
Ann Dale, we can't hear you, sweetie. Anything you can do on your end? Ann Nicholson?
Ann Dale, love, you have to unmute yourself. I cannot do it for you.
All right. You know what, Ann, you might want to log off and come back on. Is that a good advice, Ann Nicholson?
Well, yes, because Ann Dale, you appear to be unmuted, and that we should be able to hear you from, you know, a tech perspective.
Okay, so go ahead and go off and come back on. I'll read this quote and we'll just go on, and we'll get you back on later, okay?
Or you can just turn on and off your video. Sometimes that helps with the sound.
Thank you. So yeah, this is I just thought this was an interesting quote. She says, "In every human beast, God has implanted a principle which we call love of freedom. It is impatient of oppression and pants for deliverance." Ain't that the truth? And then you see at the bottom, we see all these images of Columbia delivering the oppressed. So this is a feature that we see quite a bit in art of this helping, this healing aspect of Columbia. I think very, very important to point out. But now we really need to just back up a bit here. And yeah, there's really not enough time to make this the focus of our presentation today. But you know, we have to at least mention, of course, that you know, something we never must forget, that America was here before the Spaniards and before those fleeing from oppression came to these glorious shores, many of whom became oppressors themselves, committing genocide on the First Nation peoples and systematizing slave trade. And this is an important topic that Rosemary will seek to bring a little perspective to in a small way later on. But I wanted to address this question that actually Ann Dale brought up when we were preparing for this presentation. Why aren't we using an indigenous name for the being of America? Well, we have to remember that the native peoples consisted of many different tribes with their, you know, own dialects, their own customs. They were working with the specific spirit of place where they lived. You know, there was no unified country, no one name for the spirit of the land as a whole. But it's important to note that we certainly see in these early depictions of the spirit of America as holding the quality of the indigenous people because it lives so strongly in the land itself. This one it really holds a mythic quality, right? Do you see the unicorns? Amazing. And so I just want to touch on this topic too, that it again deserves its own seminar. but this idea of the Marian apparitions, specifically Our Lady of Guadalupe, which occurred in 1531. So Our Lady is often called the Empress of the Americas. And there is most certainly a powerful connection here, friends. It's also, I think, a foreshadowing of the reappearance of the Christ in the etheric, which is something we talk about a lot in anthroposophy. And it's, for me, this is one of the aims of the apparitions of Mary, to open humanity to this realm of the formative forces in the surrounding atmosphere of the earth, pointing us also to the future destiny of the being of America as the new Isis-Sophia. So this for me is, kind of the entire point of this presentation, this idea of this future. So I'm gonna turn off my screen share here and invite Ultraviolet to do a little musical interlude so we can sort of just take in what has been said so far, and this last image of opening up this etheric realm. Ultraviolet, are you out there?
Hey, everybody. Yeah, so I was thinking about which song I could sing today, and it was pretty clear that I should sing a song that my mom wrote the melody for, and Hildegard von Bingen, good old Hildegard, wrote the words, and it's called Antiphon for the Divine Sophia. And the words go, "You of the whirling wings circling, encompassing energy of life, you quicken the world in your grasp. You quicken the world in your grasp. One wing soars in heaven, one wing sweeps the earth, and the third flies all around us. Praise to Sophia, let all the earth praise her." So yeah, me and my mom actually recorded this song over the summer. And I thought, since I'm all alone over here, I'm going to use my trusty looper pedal and, yeah, sing it for you now. Hopefully this goes through all right. You of the whirling wings circling, encompassing energy of light, you quicken the world in your grasp. You quicken the world in your grasp. One wing soars in heaven, one wing sweeps the earth, and the third flies all around us. Praise to Sophia, let all the earth praise her. Praise to Sophia, let all the earth praise her. You of the whirling wings circling, encompassing energy of light, you quicken the world in your grasp. You quicken the world in your grasp. One wing soars in heaven, one wing soars in heaven, one wing sweeps the earth, one wing sweeps the earth, and the third flies all around. Praise to Sophia, praise to Sophia, praise to Sophia, praise to Sophia. You of the whirling wings, you of the whirling wings, encompassing energy of life. You quicken the world in your grasp. You quicken the world in your grasp. You quicken the world in your grasp. One wing soars in heaven, one wing soars in heaven, one wing sweeps the earth, one wing sweeps the earth, and the third flies all around. Praise to Sophia, praise to Sophia, praise to Sophia. You of the whirling wings, you of the whirling wings, encompassing whirling wings, encompassing energy of life. You quicken the world in your grasp. You quicken the world in your grasp. soars in one wing soars in heaven, and the third flies all around. Praise to Sophia, let all the earth praise her. Praise to Sophia, let all the earth praise her. Praise to Sophia, let all the earth praise her. Praise to Sophia, let all the earth praise her.
Thank you. Beautiful. Very inspiring. Love you. Wow. Yeah. That's it, right? This is what we live for. So, yeah, beautiful. I hope that helped just move that seed deeper into our soul life, right? So that when we come back to this now, yeah, we know that in the outside world, there is a lot of racism, a lot of oppression, that there are still some societal stumbling blocks to the achievement of our highest potential that we just saw revealed through the power of sound vibration. And we see that, we have work to do, that the world, it has been moving into really these unprecedented environmental, economic, geopolitical upheavals that we're in the midst of this global pandemic. But it's a chance to feel the greater calling of the spiritual connections that are there, waiting to help ease our fears, waiting to put us in that place of harmony, to provide us with a sense of unshakable purpose. For America has a great destiny, like we all do. So this, to me, is the ideal model. Out of many, one. But in our time, it's been corrupted and it's been co-opted by the 1%. So we need to really bring it back to the unity that includes all humanity. And this is one of the true goals of America. Maybe our motto should be something like all for one and one for all. Maybe because that would help us to really think about the other, and recognize that we need to give out love into the world, sing our song of beauty and love out into the world, to have it reflected back to us. And that becomes a counterforce to all the hoarding of the almighty dollar, right? That keeps us stuck. So, I'm going to say it, but a case may be made that, the patriarchal ideas about the divine could be responsible for many of the ills currently facing our society. Perhaps what is needed is a connection not only to our nation's God, but to our nation's forgotten goddess, who has many names. As a matter of fact, images of America's divine feminine nature are out there in the world, waiting to be rediscovered, reclaimed. This strong image of the divine adorns, the entrances to all the major government buildings in Washington, D.C. Now, do you even know what D.C. stands for? It's District of Columbia, right? We say it, we don't even remember what the essence of it is. People ask me, well, where do you get this name Columbia, right? And well, it's written in the sacred geometry of the Capitol, waiting for us to reclaim it back from the villainous explorer, right? To find the true essence of the dove, which is the image of the Holy Spirit, connected to healing and to wisdom, to the Sophia, and the power of the world Pentecost, right? To set our souls ablaze with a sense of purpose, a pointer to the time when we will have a purified astral body, and that allows us to remove the veil of the new Isis-Sophia as the spirit self. So friends, if you don't get anything else from this presentation, please, I hope this at least plants a seed for the future. But for now, let's take a little stroll around the National Mall in the Capitol. For Columbia, in her many facets, is everywhere, hidden in plain sight. We can call her truth and justice, for she stands faithfully balancing the scales in front of the Department of Justice. She is the source of inspiration and knowledge displayed at the entrance to the Department of Education. She is the goddess of new life, harvest, and abundance, who offers her sheaves of wheat at the Department of Agriculture. And as we've already pointed out, she stands guard atop the Capitol building in her original aspect of as an Indian queen, called the Spirit of Freedom. And until recently, she stood behind the podium of the Speaker of the House. And it was taken down by our current administration, or the past one.
Hazel, we're seeing the old slide before you started your slideshow. I think you have to go stop that share and then start another one and choose the slides.
Oh gosh, okay, thank you. Let me try it again. What are you seeing?
We see them now.
Okay. All right, darn it. Okay, so la di da da da. Okay, so this one we're talking about, right? You know, the all for one and one for all. That's where this comes from. And yeah, you know, the goddess with many names, and some of them, you know, Jessica, Catherine, Ultraviolet. I see a lot of goddesses out there, right? And so this idea of the District of Columbia and the connection with the new Isis. So here we have, this is justice. And this is the Department of Education and agriculture. And here again is this a close-up of the Spirit of Freedom as an Indian queen on the top of the Capitol building. And here is what used to stand behind the Speaker of the House. And yeah, it was taken down. So, you know, in contrast to this, when the original founders of this country built the District of Columbia, they called it the Holy City and dedicated it to, you know, they envisioned it as a temple to the goddess. And here's a quote: "The first temple dedicated to the sovereignty of the people." Friends, we have to take that sovereignty back and ask ourselves, who is this? Who is this goddess? And how is it that we as a nation have forgotten her, despite her ubiquitous presence atop the nation's most prominent institutions of power? Does that make sense? So, as I said earlier, from the beginning, when Columbia was first revealed as the goddess of this land, she was seen by the native peoples as an Indian queen, a guardian of liberty, freedom, a generous provider of plenty. And it's true that after the colonists came to America, Columbia changes. She's then pictured wearing the cap of freedom, later seen in the French Revolution. She holds a cornucopia. The eagle, the rattlesnake are sacred to her. She is known as a guardian spirit. And in the terminology of anthroposophy, we call her the archangel or the folk spirit of the American people. So yeah, this spirit is sometimes referred to as liberty, right? As in the Statue of Liberty. Other times, independence, as in the Declaration of Independence. I love this image of the Lady of the Republic. She presided over the Columbian Exposition at the Chicago World's Fair. So we still have a replica of this statue in Hyde Park that our family likes to take little field trips to. It's quite amazing. And hey, you know what? Maybe you've heard of the South American country, Colombia. I mean, we also have a thing called British Columbia in Canada as well, right? So it's clear that there was a strong, positive egregore, if you will, a collective thought form of this archetype living in the psyche of the people. For the name Columbia is borne by many other beings, a great river, towns, counties, businesses, cultural organizations, right? Ships, songs. My point is the people obviously felt her presence strongly. And if we're talking about the folk soul of the people, that says a lot. It's not something that is put on the people. It comes out of our collective soul forces. Oh, I love this image of the personification of the Declaration of Independence. This little poem here. She rose, America to be, united in her states and free, sealed and signed her common weal, for friends a home, for foes her steel. Robed in the sun's rays, east and west, beneath the midnight stars at rest. Sounds like a Eurythmy verse, doesn't it? I think we should do some Eurythmy to that. And then this other image here shows the growth of industry, you know, agriculture. We see a broken chain at the bottom, an eagle. In the background, Statue of Liberty, right? The anchor, a symbol of hope. And of course, the caduceus, a symbol of healing. Yeah, I love these depictions. They tell us so much about the consciousness of that time. And I'm sure, you know, if you lived into them, that they would speak to you like they have to me. And so here we have some popular commercial images. It's fascinating. The Lady Liberty coin. When I was a kid, I collected those. And yeah, her energy is resurfacing in our modern time. I know I'm feeling it. So we can always count on, you know, the soul of the artist to bring about what's living in our collective souls. But this folk spirit, who I'm calling Columbia, spirit of the original people, perceived by the American revolutionaries as an Indian goddess, has been usurped by Uncle Sam, her opposite in every way. And I remember Steiner saying something to the effect that the only sin that can't be forgiven is the sin against the Holy Spirit. When I look at the visage of Uncle Sam with his goat face, I'm sorry, it just creeps me out. It's hard to make something out of that isn't positive. And I just don't want to be part of that collective karma. So to me, you know, the true spirit of America is a strong and beautiful peer of all the other national cultures. Interestingly enough, all personified by the divine feminine. So yeah, the American Revolution later inspired the French Revolution, which became a catalyst for their gift of the Statue of Liberty. And did you know that the song Hail Columbia was actually the national anthem until it was changed in 1931 to the Star Spangled Banner, a song glorifying war. Perhaps this was a way of preparing the consciousness of the people to go to war. We call that propaganda. So as the authentic potential of the American people, Columbia is hardly manifested. Her destiny, if we the people will it, is to take back her divine power, to manifest a true land of the dove where wisdom reigns. For many immigrants who used to be able to end their long journey to freedom at her feet, justice and hope were personified in her form. America's true folk spirit welcomes everyone into New York Harbor with the promise of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. She offers these gifts to the world's downtrodden as they enter the new world, seeking a new life, asking the world to give her their tired, their poor, the huddled masses. I know we're running out of time here, but if you ever look at the symbolism of the Statue of Liberty, the 7 points of her crown, for instance, represent the Pleiades star cluster, also known as the Seven Sisters. But I do want to take time here to have Sally Greenberg share these words that are engraved inside the Statue of Liberty. Sally?
Here at our sea-washed sunset gates shall stand a mighty woman with a torch whose flame is the imprisoned lightning, and her name Mother of Exiles. From her beaconed hand glows worldwide welcome. Give me your tired, your poor, your huddled masses yearning to breathe free. The wretched refuge of your teeming shores. Send these, the homeless, tempest tossed to me. I lift my lamp beside the golden door.
Yeah, so can we renew this conception in our thinking now? George Orwell, in his seminal work, 1984, reminds us who controls the past controls the future. Who controls the present controls the past. So friends, let's reclaim our past. This will give us the courage to love the world that we are in right now. And then we can reclaim the wisdom of America to envision and co-create a future where the spirit of the United States can take her rightful place in world evolution. And we can unveil the being of the new Isis-Sophia as the spiritualized human being. So yeah, I'm going to just leave you here with this hint of our potential future. And I'll end my presentation there. Thank you.
Thank you, Hazel. And I think we're now going to transition to Stewart, who's going to share with us the connection of all of this with biodynamics.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, my name is Stewart Lundy, and I'm with Perennial Roots Farm in Accomack, Virginia, where we practice biodynamic agriculture. For those of you perhaps less familiar than others, biodynamics is an anthroposophical approach to agriculture where we seek to use the life processes at work with nature in a conscious manner. Reflecting with what Hazel had shared is that some of you may have also been aware of is that Pluto is now returning to the same location that it was in 1776. The Pluto Return is a pretty major event in the life of a nation, particularly with the expression of its truest self. For me, the relationship of Sophia, of wisdom, of this female archetype, the being of this continent, relates to agriculture in as much as how do we prepare our souls to receive what she has to offer? And for me, how do we prepare our soil to receive that as well? The Virgin Sophia is sometimes referred to as a virgin, not out of some like puritanical notion, but rather that she's free of any distraction or rival images. Yeah, exactly, soul and soil. And that she is there reflecting faithfully the reflection from the cosmos in a purest possible form. So how do we make our souls or our soils receptive to such cosmic forces, the workings of the divine? In the farm, the task there is to make the soil to such a state that it can receive these. You heard earlier that intimation that we're reliving a sort of recapitulation of an Egyptian epoch. And you can kind of see vestiges of this in terms of how we treat ourselves, how we treat our soil, and particularly how we seem to approach the idea of death. Modern agriculture has largely switched over to industrial scale desertification of soils, where the living soil is killed off as much as possible so that only what you grow can survive there. They are fertilized with salt fertilizers, not unlike the reliance of Egypt on salt to come back from the River Nile and wash into their beds. Similarly, the embalming process in Egypt is not that dissimilar to what our modern tendency seems to be, which is to preserve everything so that they can't return into the natural cycle. Unlike the Greek mode or the Indian mode of cremation or the Christian mode of proper burial, there seems to be this prejudice against that life cycle, and it's something that in its way we do need to overcome. In biodynamics, we center around the cow, not the bull, but the female mother cow. We take the manure from the female cow and we incubate it within her horn over winter, the period when Isis Sirius is visible in the sky. And we use this as the basis of renewed fertility for the soil so that it can receive the cosmic streams from the universe. Without these very much feminine divine impulses, it doesn't matter how much of the cosmic father shines on a dead soil, there's nothing to receive it. It will heat the soil up, but none of it is turned into sugars. None of it is transformed into something lived in this world. It bakes and then the heat radiates right back out. So there's something that we're after on a spiritual soul level when we think about meditating or contemplating the divine and manifesting it, which is really little more than reflecting without imaging, but being the image ourselves of this divine body of wisdom and becoming that reflection. When the founders were debating what animal we were going to choose, it was Jefferson who proposed the dove. Adams wanted the eagle. Franklin wanted the turkey, which would have been considerably more fun perhaps, but we tended to settle with the eagle, though I do think it is overdue that we consider the task of the dove. And that is what we're moving into now. With the return of Pluto, for me at least, we have the opportunity to re-engage our karma and perhaps to move on, not unlike when each of us experiences a Saturn return. The resistance of the outer world provides opportunity for us to become individuated. It feels like resistance, but we don't really feel who we are unless there's some resistance and difference. So we're moving into that, I feel. For me, biodynamics is this task of preparing this body with the right forces, the right nourishment, so that we can be receptive to that. Steiner had found himself trying social efforts and different projects, and a number of them failed, actually pretty terribly. And he came to the conclusion that society was not ripe for these things, and we actually had to go back to the basics, which is the nourishment and cultivation of the imagination in youth in particular. And spiritual food in particular is how we can bring people to that place. From a biodynamic lens, we've forgotten why we eat food altogether. We eat perhaps what tastes good or feels good without thinking of it as actually having spiritual import. And it's about trying to get back to that mindset so that we have the basic tools to fully be embodied as souls. We are just as much a being of soul and spirit, whether or not we can actualize it, but the biodynamic impulse is about bringing it into this world. And it's no small task given industrial agriculture and in many ways the desecration of the corn goddess, who, I mean, I can't imagine what indigenous people must feel seeing truckloads of corn and it blowing off and just falling on the road. This is not what that was meant to be for us, nor for the rest of the world. But we have this opportunity to return to a kind of nature wisdom. And what sets anthroposophy apart from, we might say, earlier modes of nature wisdom isn't that they contradict each other. It's more that anthroposophy is a return after the industrial era where we became isolated, separated, and estranged from ourselves, from God, and from nature. And it's precisely the fact that it is a return by moving forward, not backwards, that offers hope not just to the lost indigenous traditions of Europe, but to all other indigenous traditions around the world. It's that we don't simply have to go back and remember from tradition, but we can rediscover creatively together. So for me, it's about trying to find our way to that and provide the basis for actual spiritual perception. And the deficiency of nutrition, really, it shouldn't surprise us that people are unable to engage spiritual things, given what they're putting into their bodies or what they're looking at. Whatever we look at, we become. If we fixate on evil things, we become like that. And we have to be very careful what we fixate on, because our imagination on the astral plane becomes what we look at. If we're looking at a cat, it becomes a cat. And if we are to image and reflect Sophia herself, it is to be virtually to be imageless in front of the divine, so that we can manifest that in the world and be the light that this world needs. I'd like to close with the opening to T.S. Eliot's Choruses from the Rock. The eagle soars in the summit of heaven. The hunter with his dog pursues his course. O perpetual revolution of configured stars. O perpetual recurrence of determined seasons. O world of spring and autumn, birth and dying. The endless cycle of idea and action, endless invention, endless experiment, brings knowledge of motion, but not of stillness, knowledge of speech, but not of silence, knowledge of words and ignorance of the word. All our knowledge brings us nearer to our ignorance. All our ignorance brings us nearer to death, but nearness to death no nearer to God. Where is the life we have lost in living? Where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? The cycles of heaven in 20 centuries bring us farther from God and nearer to the dust. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Stewart, for that. Now we're going to transition to Rosemary McMullen, who is going to conduct a land acknowledgement for us. Rosemary.
Friends, we'll also be able to take questions and everything during the plenary at the end. So if you have questions and all of that, please write them out so we can have them later.
Monongahela, Allegheny, Ohio. I am speaking to you from the place where the Allegheny River from the northeast and the Monongahela from the south forms the Ohio, which runs west, finally to the Mississippi. I have invoked the 4 directions as the foundation stone meditation does. And I'm hoping through this little presentation, all of us will develop a daily ceremony of our ancestors and our place. Let's call up our ancestors of the last 5 generations. If we have First Nations among our ancestors, let us give thanks. We can provide to this circle centuries of continuity with the land we share today, with so many from other parts of the world. We envision our forebears arriving in this continent. They elected to cross the Great Water and come to the Americas. What century was it? Did they head out to the wilderness once they got here? Did they come by plane and take the subway uptown? Were they alone? Did they come with a huge family? Were they children in arms? One thing for sure, they brought their ancestors, they brought their folk spirit, and this started to mesh with the indigenous who were already there. Few of the colonists who came knew that the Americas was the place where the harmonic double exerts strongest influence. Geographic medicine and the double, a lecture by Steiner, the 16th of November, 1917, is essential to understanding the geographic and etheric qualities that are important for America. As I understand it, the First Nations had already developed a healthy symbiotic relationship with all these forces, spiritual and natural. Whereas the newcomers, they were unprepared. In that lecture, Steiner said they kept back the movement until the consciousness soul age began. The colonists started to come at the end of the 1500s. They started to pour in, the end of the 15th century. Wherever the colonists, slaves, and immigrants came to live, First Nations were living or had lived before. They were killed or removed, sometimes simultaneously with the colonists, sometimes recently. In slave states, continuous oppression was part of everyday life. We're talking about our ancestors arriving into a series of places that were scenes of oppression, brutality, violence. Steiner's words, today the human being should not move blindly through earthly evolution. He must be able to see through such relationships. Today's gathering is a step to build that skill. As children growing up playing freely in the forests, fields, plains, hills, woods, our imaginations often included the Indians, as they were called. Some of us saw them. The place names indicated them. Land acknowledgement is a ceremony that's being used formally in some former colonial countries, Canada, Australia, New Zealand, and many others. And it is now officially recommended by the US Department of Art and Culture. The key components of land acknowledgement are history and language. Everybody should take this up in their own way. Find out who the indigenous people were in the place where you live. The history of the land, going way back, and also related treaties that were conducted. The names of indigenous people from those communities who are living around you. Indigenous place names and language. The correct pronunciation of the names of the tribes, places, and individuals. There are many styles, many names. Start the research and find out what feels right to you. The First Nations are saying that land acknowledgement verbally is not enough, and it's merely a starting point. They ask for our support if we're becoming conscious. Here are some ways to take actions. Donate time or money to their organizations. Support the Indigenous-led grassroots change movements and campaigns. And if possible, if you own land, commit to returning land. Local, state, and federal governments around the world are currently returning land to Indigenous people. It's happening. So as an example, I'll give you my own land acknowledgement. I grew up in the Chicago area where the Council of Three Fires, the United Tribes of Ottawa, Ojibwa, and Potawatomi lived in the basin of the Illinois and Milwaukee rivers. Lake Michigan was a centerpiece of my sense of home. My paternal line includes a Mohawk of the Lake Ontario region. So Walt Whitman's poem On the Shores of Lake Ontario. She married into my Irish ancestors who arrived in this continent in the 1750s and settled in Ontario in the 1790s, living peacefully with the First Nations. We still have that land. I currently live in Pittsburgh, where the Allegheny and Monongahela rivers become the Ohio. This area was a First Nations crossroads. The water route was used by Delaware, Iroquois, Shawnee, Creek, Lenape, among others. The meeting of the three rivers was considered sacred. No permanent settlement existed before 1754, when the French built a fort. As global karma would have it, this sacred place became the center of heavy US industry for 200 years. But I'm pleased to say that cleanup and reversal of that damage has been going on for the last 50 years. And it was looking very good when I moved here in 2005. Rivers can be cleaned up, and they have been. So that's one good thing about future indications. People wake up and they clean up the mistakes. So I'd like to share an insight that I had not too long ago about what's happening. I'll show you this chart and then I'll speak. There's three ways of responding to the current situation. We have the numb, those who are really unconscious, traumatized into non-action, or they're hypnotized. The woke. I didn't even know the woke existed. I have no children and I don't know much about popular culture, but a friend of mine who's a grandmother told me about the woke situation. And it seems to be that rage and blame of all of the perpetrators of any kind of social injustice is the style for the woke, and cancel culture is a way to just demonize someone who hasn't the same belief system as you. And finally, I see system changers, which I hoped to count myself among them, developing fourfold consciousness, wanting to heal trauma, activate the social field for awareness-based systems change, so that the future that's wanting to come can emerge with spiritual consciousness. In 2020, we saw a big shift in awareness at the atrocities that have existed in this land for 400 years. And the numb and the woke are two responses to that realization. Shadow, karma, and trauma. These are terms that often come up and often have been lumped together in response to these historical atrocities. Each term indicates forces from the unconscious, including our ancestors, that affect people without their volition or knowledge. Our ancestors, were they Indian killers, slaveholders, bystanders, accomplices, witnesses running quickly in the other direction? Well, your family history will probably tell you answers to those questions. People and places around us carry that karma and trauma. Lingering spiritual ethers and beings are palpable. President Biden brought up systemic racism and soul healing several times in his inaugural address. This is such a good sign. I'm sure that we were all pleased to hear him say those things. Cultural historian Jacob Needleman, in his book, The American Soul, says, America will not heal its soul until a critical mass of people do the following. Quote, one needs to try to enter into the position not only of the victim, but of the oppressor. It is not hard to imagine up to a certain point, of course, the suffering of the slave or the brutalized Indian. What is in its way much harder, but absolutely essential, is to let oneself feel what it is like to murder and brutalize wrapped in a sure sense of self-justification, unquote. Perhaps you hear, like I do, in Dr. Needleman's words, our work coping with the harmonic double. Because, as Rudolf Steiner said, the human being must be exposed to what is harmful in order to overcome it and thereby gain strength. The healing social life is found when, in the mirror of each soul, the whole community finds its reflection, and when in the community, the virtue of each individual is living. This is the social motto given to Edith Marion by Rudolf Steiner. And if we think of the mirror of the community being all our ancestors, as Stewart was talking about the planets and the stars' benevolence and assistance, and all of Hazel's references to the spiritual beings that she sees and feels, hidden in plain sight. So that's our community. And I recently dawned on me that the indigenous people that I've known and learned from do indeed embody the social motto already. Their relationship with the spiritual world and the harmony of earth systems echoes in their language, rituals, daily life. I went on a nature walk through the cypress forests of North Florida with a Seminole whose words and presence changed me profoundly in reverence for nature. There were about 24 families taking this nature walk. And at the end, we sat in a circle and several people were just gently crying. It was such a etheric transformation that this wonderful teacher enabled in those people. Recently, I learned from a Yaqui, who's a little younger than I am, Stan Padilla, to receive the first morning sun on my face, make sacred and present the first sip of water I take, the first words I speak each morning. All our ancestors include the river beings, mountain beings, local, global. I look at the map of United States, Canada, Mexico, all of the First Nations names, cities, states, rivers, lakes. I can feel the difference in those surviving, those First Nations people surviving and carrying thousands of generations who paid reverent attention. So I want to bring to your attention Wena Jamu Kwasat, she who brings the light. She's an American lawyer named Sherry Mitchell. She's a Penobscot, born on Penobscot Island in Maine. And she wrote this book, Sacred Instructions, Indigenous Wisdom for Living Spirit-Based Change. And when I read her book, I was amazed that it was very congruent with social threefolding. Recently, Joan Slee of the social section of the Gantianum announced during the panel that was held at the end of November that they're adding ecology to the threefold, so it's fourfold. And the idea is that it's been present all along, if you think about it. And in sharing analysis of what needs to be done politically, socially, she says, water sovereignty, food sovereignty, energy sovereignty, and educational sovereignty. If we have those four, we have everything. And if you look closer, you'll see that water, food, and energy are what are needed for the economy. Water, food, and energy are what are needed for people to live. Education can't happen unless there are living people. So all of the threefold qualities are enfolded in her program. And these are programs for water sovereignty and food sovereignty. If you watch the news, you notice that there's still water sovereignty crises in Minnesota and Canada going on as we speak. But we need to assist these struggles and put that as sort of a map of the future to ensure food and land that will be reclaimed by biodynamics, and energy that won't pollute and destroy the land and the air and the water. Okay. Economically speaking, since the colonialists took the land and access to food and water, we who arrived later are beneficiaries to that theft after the fact. How conscious are we of this ongoing process of resource grabbing? How can we rectify a system of economic inequality centuries established? One way is to become a systems changer following so many regenerative techniques coming to the fore, such as ULab and collective sense making. Another is to become a tuning fork for an elevated consciousness and a more equitable reality. And All of the images and inspirational spiritual connections that Hazel was pointing out are examples of how that tuning fork would work on a daily basis. We do this by investing in higher emotional currency every day, supporting one another and valuing each other's gifts and the gifts offered to us by the earth. By choosing to feed higher vibrational thoughts and emotions, we elevate our own frequency. We contribute greatly to the elevation of our planetary vibration, and we open ourselves and the world to a greater creative future. This is the words of Sherry. If we hope to create a new reality, we have to shift our emotional energy away from the reality being presented and focus on the reality that we wish to create. This doesn't mean that we stop paying attention to what is going on around us. We can't create change if we are unwilling to look at the things that need changing. We must be willing to look poverty, pain, injustice, environmental destruction, and all forms of bigotry and hate squarely in the eye. As we do so, we must learn to limit the mental, emotional, and energetic investment that we make in those images. That is what I call the 80-10-10 rule. We invest 10% of our energy looking at what needs to be changed, another 10% holding back the tide of harm that has been created by previous bad investments, and the final 80% creating a reality that offers compassion, safety, justice, equality, and sustainability for all life. I believe the COVID crisis has provided a worldwide opening to reckon with all of these inner and social challenges at a higher level of attunement. More people are meditating, more people are reading, more people are stopping the rat race and questioning the meanings of life. More people are ready to rise and work together in new ways to accord with the natural order of life. And Zoom has brought more of us together, inspiring in new ways that we never could have imagined a year ago. Now to transition into the artistic gesture with colors and pencils, chalks, whatever you have. First, from the Chickasaw poet, Linda Hogan. Suddenly, all my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say. Watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands. And from me, here's a thought. If you believe in karma and reincarnation, we are our ancestors as well as the children of the future.
Rosemary, did you want to speak a little bit about what you want the art exercise to be?
Think about your ancestors. All my ancestors are behind me. Be still, they say, watch and listen. You are the result of the love of thousands. I'm sure everybody has a lot of images from the foregoing presentations, so I think everybody should just sit down and see what comes.
Beautiful. Thank you.
So Hazel, we're going to take 7 minutes for this. So I'll be the timekeeper, and I will just speak into the group when 7 minutes have passed. Okay, we're drawing to the end of our 7 minutes. If folks would like to conclude their artistic activity and regather. Maybe folks would like to hold their work up into their camera. This is an illustration of e pluribus unum, for sure. No two images are alike. Beautiful. And now I think we're going to go into the co-presentation now by Sally Greenberg and Ann Dale. That will be a contemplation of the expression of our civil responsibility.
Hi there, I'm Sally. And Anne and I have been preparing for this little introduction into our groups by doing a dream inquiry for the last 3 nights. And every night before we went to bed, we seated our thoughts, our mind, with the desire to start a conversation with this goddess, this spirit of our folk spirit. And every morning we would talk about what we had written in our dream journals, and Anne put together the basics of what we came up with through this process. And we share this with you just to give you maybe inspiration when Anne reads the questions, that you'll find your own path and your own conversation. When we connect to this energy, it will respond to us and have a communication with us, this folk spirit. And so this was our process in starting the conversation, but you'll find your own within yourself. And are you there?
I am here. So I want to share too that I think part of the message is how this collaborative effort. Can you not hear me? It shows that I'm not muted.
Okay.
We can hear you fine. You're good. I think
Okay.
Sally's having a little
Hazel,
audio.
do you have a slide of the oh, you're there.
All right. And Sally, you might want to mute yourself because there's a little bit of an echo. So I wanted to share how incredibly inspiring and encouraging it was to share in this collaborative process. I had no idea how much would happen from this focused attention between Sally and I. I mean, we barely know each other, and now we know each other a lot more, but things happened. And I believe that's because we asked for a lot, we got a lot. And one night Sally had a dream, another night I had one. One night we had this sense that it was very similar and we were working things and churning. And at the end of this, something distilled, and it just so happens that I'm the one that's gonna read what came from the collaboration. But I also had this really profound understanding that the folk soul is our body. It's our earth, it's personal, it's transpersonal, it's our earth, it's our unique mineral formations. It's how the spirit can land in our body. We hold a part. It's layered like a body carpet of glimmer and wonder, in ready work and patience. From the things that we've eaten, from the soil, from the conversations we've digested, from community, from experiences, it's in us. And it's there for transparency, ideally, to shine, for all of us to shine, for others to shine. And this substance, it's us and it's It's our field of soil and soul, which was where Sally and I started with this. And we didn't know that was going to be a theme here. This soil and soul are so similar in words. Folk, soul, earth, body, soil of my heart, souls of my friends meeting mine. Fertile sky like black earth, a nesting place for stars to enjoin, embed, shine. Where this year can I find my place in my role? Is it close to home? Is it in the transforming of my own soil, my own soul, my own heart? Can I listen to my own soul and heart's calling? Can I listen quietly and long enough and patiently enough? Can I let freedom, the spirit of freedom and the spirit of place where we live, this folk soul, can I let that take the place where habit, pattern, and reactions had been? Can I listen long enough, quiet enough? Is my role further afield? Is it in my neighbor's field? Can I hold a vaster space of patience to hear and let heal what ails my friend? Is it in a larger community that I have patience for? Can I take the time to hear the woes of the stricken, the disadvantaged, the fallen, the preyed upon? Is it to hear those who have been nurturing wounds of hurt for generations? All colors and genders to the rainbow, with hurting and hearts waiting to be heard so that they can heal. Is it my role to listen to them while I can feel and see their whole and their holiness? Is it even closer to infinity, where can I find it within myself to hear the woes of those oppressors, those who bear the burdens of what they have, their own hurts? That's a revolutionary kind of love. Can I do that? Or is my role closer to home? So there's all kinds of ways we can show up, and the questions we're going to take into our breakout sessions really distill down to what is our civil responsibility? Where can we show up? Is it close in our personal space? Does it go further out? What does that look like? And then how can we recommit to our core values and re-examining those perhaps even? And how can we recommit to one another, making room for the other person? And how can we recommit to the spirit of time and place, to this folk soul and soil, that which we are? So we're going to have time in our breakout groups for 10 minutes. What do you see as wanting to come into being in America? And how will you contribute to it? And then we'll have time to share our artistic creations, and we'll see if something new arises. So we'll start that now.
Okay, I'm going to assign everyone to your breakout room. And you should have 2 to 3 people per room based on the number who are here. And I will type the questions into the rooms once you get there, if you need a reminder for the question. Okay, the rooms are closing and folks are popping back into the main room now.
Hi, everybody. It was a little bumpy there, right? Did your ride go okay? It's all right. Sometimes our karma takes us into the ethers and we kind of float around a little bit.
Just not enough time really to, but that's okay. We got some threads going.
Good. Yeah, I mean, please put in the chat if you want to contact other people and you want to share your email addresses or whatever. It's always good to make connections.
So we're coming to our closing, and it's always a little bit heartfelt to say goodbye after such a rich time of sharing, where we go beyond the everyday conversation and the everyday trains of thought to rich content like contemplating the spirit of Colombia, our indigenous roots, our connection to the land and biodynamics, and then moving into the breakout rooms and our dream lives and our connections to one another. It's very hard to say goodbye. And a part of me wants to open up the floor and have everybody just start sharing. But a wiser part of me knows that that could go on all night and we would never, ever get to the end of it. So let's let the wiser, higher part rule and take what we have experienced into our hearts and minds and let it inspire us to take on perhaps an inauguration, a civil responsibility of our own on the scale of 1s and 2s and 3s to move forward into this new year together. So with gratitude to all the presenters, let's pass it to Sally Greenberg, who will read our closing verse.
You know, I think it's fine to do that, but I do want to leave. I know it's past our time, but I do want to. We'll close with the verse, but then people. I'm sorry, we really did not leave any time for people to ask questions or to. I really wanted to have like a plenary, like a real time to be together in the bigger group. So after Sally reads the verse, those who want to leave, please do. It's been a long time, and I thank you, Anne, for all that you've brought us today. But those who do want to stay and have a short conversation, ask some questions, I'm available to do that a little bit afterwards. So with that in mind, we'll have.
And I'm Anne, so I get to read the verse. So this is Rudolf Steiner in 1923, and it's his verse for America. May our feeling penetrate to the center point of our hearts and seek in love to unite itself with human beings of like goal and with spirit beings full of grace who strengthen us from realms of light and illuminate our love while gazing down on our earnest, heartfelt striving.
Thank you. Those who have to leave, thank you, Anne, so much for all that you've done to bring this together and help us hold this container. And the rest who want to stay, we'll take a little time and please, yeah, I wasn't really attentive to the chat as far as questions and stuff are concerned, but if you have any for any of us, please, just unmute yourself and let's hear it. And I'm gonna stop this share for now so we can see each other. And then actually at the very end, maybe we'll have Sally do this beautiful poem by Alice Walker, and maybe that could be our second closing later on. So did anyone have any comments or stuff that they wanted to share from the breakout rooms?
Well, we had Sharon Keller from Washington, D.C., who is African-American, participating in our group, and she brought up that she has been in the Anthroposophical Society since the 70s, and she didn't feel like her voice or presence had been valued or heard to the extent that the values would expect. So this whole arena of Black Lives Matter and that part of the wounds and scars of our nation now more than ever, I think is something that if you are here because you have, you want to carry social banner of anthroposophy, that's something that we need to get into in some creative, new ways.
Thank you. That makes a lot of sense. Anyone else?
Yes, I put my question in the chat. I don't know if Rosemary is still here.
I am.
But what is the full date? I have the year, but not the date of the lecture that Steiner gave on the harmonic double.
16 November 1917.
16 November. Okay. And a follow-up question, I don't want to take up too much time. Does he, so the harmonic double, is that in terms of karma, is that a particular thing that's prominent and significant for the destiny and the karma of the United States, or the whole North and South thingy?
It's the whole hemisphere, because the mountains go from Alaska all the way down to Tierra del Fuego.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I've always wondered about that. So it is.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And the Panama Canal created a break in the spiritual flow, and the Dalai Lama actually held a ceremony there. I forget the date. It was in the early 80s to correct that wound in the whole hemisphere.
Oh, goodness.
But it's a very complicated lecture.
Oh.
I think, you know, if we had a study group, we could meet for, you know, a few months every week. And we just, you know, kind of, there's many layers of information in there that are hard to digest.
I see. Okay. Thank you.
I would like to share a prayer that came up during our breakout room. It's a hymn. It goes like this. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer that calls me from a world of care and bids me at my Father's throne make all my wants and wishes known. In seasons of distress and grief, my soul has often found relief, and oft escaped the temperer's snare by thy return, sweet hour of prayer. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, the joys I feel, the bliss I share, of those whose anxious spirits burn with strong desires for thy return. With such I hasten to the place where God my Savior shows his face, and gladly take my station there and wait for thee, sweet hour of prayer. Sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, thy wings shall my petition bear to him whose truth and faithfulness engage the waiting soul to bless. And since he bids me seek his face, believe his word and trust his grace, I'll cast on him my every care and wait for thee, sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer, sweet hour of prayer. I thy consolation share, till from Mount Pisgah's lofty height I view my home and take my flight. This robe of flesh I'll drop and rise to seize the everlasting prize and shout while passing through the air. Farewell, farewell, sweet hour of prayer.
Is that your poem, Vanessa?
No, it's a hymn.
Oh, a hymn. Okay. What was the name of it?
It's called Sweet Hour of Prayer. It was recommended to me in our breakout room by
Wow.
One of the participants.
That's lovely. I've never heard the whole thing before.
Mm-hmm.
So Hazel, could I speak? Charlene here.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, thank you so much. You know, the spirit of America is such an important topic because it involves, it's a really big topic though, not only the history, but the future and the whole idea of democracy. Like, what is a democracy? It's, you know, Americans don't really understand it, our government. So anyway, a lot of themes. I'm just wondering if like a Padlet would be something to consider, to just continue communicating with each other. And also a follow-up gathering, what I envision, sorry, so that was one question about a Padlet or some way to keep connecting. And the second question is to have a follow-up gathering, because I've been going to the People's Inauguration, and they have the idea of, having kind of a ritual of taking an oath. And so where people share why they would want to take an oath and what they're leaving behind, what they want to move to. So it's been really good, but it's just halfway through. So I don't know how it's going to end. But what I envision is, connecting with people there, inviting them to like coordinating efforts between the anthroposophic community and others that have similar ideas, but they don't know about anthroposophy.
Sounds like a great initiative.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Yeah.
So remember, folks, if you're not speaking, please just keep
Maybe,
yourself
I don't know.
muted. Yeah. Did someone else want to comment on Charlene's thought?
Yep.
And Rosemary also mentioned that she would be willing to share her research and such if you want to receive that. Yeah, her email is in the chat.
Yes. I'd like to share one of the, oh, go ahead, Jean.
Go ahead, Anne.
Well, I just had this really profound dream, and it was actually yesterday morning, and it was just a tiny dream. It takes more words to describe it, but again, going to bed with like, I want to talk with and hear and experience the folk soul. And this was the day that finally something distilled. But the image and the feeling was, I was in a more pristine layer of my body, like a higher form of the etheric is how I felt it to be. I was in the dream. And as I'm speaking this, I'm seeing this, and it's glistening, it's glimmering, it's roughly following the outline of my physical form. It's like liquid starlight, it's lubricated starlight, it's life itself, capital L. And there was this knowing that we are the folk soul. And there was that was the moment I started to wake up in the dream. And so while I was in the dream and I had these qualities, I could like go into it, and a lot happened. I don't know how long I was there, but there was this like in and out understanding. Like I could see that the whole earth body was something related to this thing that I was experiencing. And that more like this thing I was experiencing, this folk soul, was like an organ to the earth body. And it was at the level of principle, right? So it didn't have a lot of pictures. It was more like this inward exploration. And that's really all I have to say about it, but it's just so profound and so beautiful. And it felt like it was a complete gift from the spiritual world. And I don't know if that would have landed that way, except for in the collaboration of this group, right? And so it really engenders this like hope and inspiration, like how we could hold space for one another, right? Someone else might have the impulse. Someone might be this, like Hazel has this saying on her site somewhere. It's like, maybe you're not the star, maybe you're the nest for the star. So anyway, I just wanted to really share that. Thank you, Hazel, and everyone here. We all contributed.
It's amazing when you take a concept and really live into it, and it lives in you, and then it grows and it becomes something. And then it's in what you have done is then applied it and shared it as a gift to everybody else. And that's exactly what applied anthroposophy is supposed to be. So Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, and I just want to dovetail with what Charlene said. I think it's really helpful to connect with folks who just come from a totally different orientation, because then you really have to define what you think. And for instance, what Sharon shared, you know, we tend to think in terms of indigenous peoples and our forebears, and we often forget the slaves. We have to factor them in. How is their folk soul, or whatever you want to call it, impacting us, and how have they been impacted? I do think that the work of James Gordon and his work with trauma all around the world, he's trying to get the new administration to help people deal with trauma. And he has a fabulous website, it's the Center for Mind Body Medicine, that gives people educational tools. So we kind of have to wiggle around to appreciate how other people are coming. And, you know, as Anne said, she felt she's part of the folk soul. Well, yes, and we're all embodying it too. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, you know, there's something that's been sort of happening in the Anthroposophical Society itself, and especially coming out of what's going on with the Elderberries Initiative, this idea that, you know, we can't always think, oh, everybody's just supposed to come to us. You know, that we're holding anthroposophy and they're just supposed to come to us. Well, what about we go out to them? You know, we can bring our gifts to them and share it with them, you know, using language that everybody can understand, finding the commonality that we have with everybody. And that was one of the reasons why, you know, I wanted to take up this idea of, you know, how can we connect with the people's inauguration? You know, how can we make it our own in that way? And, you know, everybody should be encouraged to take up whatever vow works for them. You know, we don't want to put anything on anybody, like, oh, you have to repeat after me. But yeah, what is it that you know, and that's what we tried to talk about a little bit with the breakout rooms. You know, what is my role? What civil responsibility will I decide I want to take up in this new year? You know, so yeah.
Can you hear me? You can?
Yes.
I just, George Washington, it was so amazing. I didn't know that much about George Washington, actually, and I really want to learn more. But in my ancestry, we had a number of people that were named, their first name James or Fred, but they put in George Washington and then their last name. And as a child, I remember asking my grandpa, why is your middle name George Washington? He said, oh, he was really special. You know, and I loved what you brought. I just thank you for everything. It was very inspiring. And I'm working with 2 people now in Hawaii in the arts, just on a little Zoom. And they had asked me if I would share my work with them. And I said, oh, okay. So neither one of them knows anything about anthroposophy. And it's really wonderful. And I thought, well, I should bring a poem from, you know, somebody famous. And I thought, no, I'm just going to bring a Steiner verse. And every time we meet, I bring a new Steiner verse, and they just are blown away. And they looked up Steiner and, well, I didn't know this. And anyway, it's so amazing. You just have to take courage. But I thank you for everything, Hazel, and all the people involved in what you're doing. It's great. It's just great.
Thank you so much. And you're right. I mean, I think, you know, once we get past the initial, whatever that is that keeps us from sharing, like you say, to have the courage, but then to know that really people are just people and everybody's searching and everybody wants to have conversations. And I think that we are all really seeking to understand the spirit, you know, and if we come together in goodwill, you know, only good things can happen. So thanks for doing that and taking that initiative. Yeah. Makes a difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you.
It's going to take some courage for me to reveal a dream, a very vivid dream that I had not last night, but the night before. And it will, because it involves merda. If you're familiar with merda, I'll use that term. It's Sicilian and merde in French. But I dreamt that I was taking care of a child, special needs child, and covered with merda, both of us having to deal with it. And I kept making mistakes. I dropped the child. The child never stopped loving me and loving me despite my mistakes with it that involved piles of merda. And I dealt with it, something that I hate, something that's distasteful, but I held the child with it and dealt with it. And I woke up with that it's okay. Do it, just do it, no matter how distasteful. With love, that's it.
You know, that's like an archetypal dream. And it's interesting because my husband and I have been having similar kind of things recently. And it really relates to one of the trials of Hercules, right? You know, there's that connection between George Washington and the apotheosis of Hercules. And one of his trials is he has to muck out the stable, you know, and that's an important aspect of we can't just think that there's not going to be shit to clean up. There always is. And can we do it with love, like you said? Thank you. Thank you for being vulnerable enough to speak that, what I think we're all feeling.
Wow.
Sandra, you should say that out loud.
Oh, okay. I just wrote in the chat that in Carl Jung's sort of memoir, which is very interior, it's not so much about his external life. He recounts a dream that he had. Actually, there's a lot to the story. He knew he had this, maybe it wasn't a dream, maybe it was an image that was trying to present itself. And he knew that it was something he didn't want to see. And he fended it off for a long time, but finally he couldn't resist anymore, and it broke through. And it was the image of God in heaven dropping a giant turd on the roof of probably a particular cathedral in Switzerland where he lived. And I'm not going to try to explain how important that was to him, but it was a breakthrough in consciousness for him. It wasn't so much slogging through the shit like we're talking about, but it did involve, you know, excrement from God and some unwanted, like, so maybe that's part of the connection, something, anathema, and yet it had to come, it had to be acknowledged. And when he did, pathways opened up for he gained a kind of freedom. And I don't even remember the particulars, but his book, Memories, Dreams, Reflections, which I probably read 3 times, is really a wonderful way to get inside aspects of the wonderful Carl Jung. He's one of my teachers.
Beautiful. I love that. I know that struck me too. That's so interesting. Anyone else? Yeah, Mary?
Well, just I thought of Gandhi. That was his task, to dump the pots. That's what Gandhi did. Took care of the poop.
Anyone else out there we haven't heard from?
Okay, I'll chime in real quick.
Great.
I guess this also reminds me of the Michael prayer of facing whatever we have to face with courage and strength, going forward, and in what we're doing right now and what we're called to do. So just want to say thank you.
Lindy, can you talk about what you wrote in the chat here? I'm not quite understanding.
Can you read the Michael prayer, please?
Oh, sure. Let me go grab it. It'll be just a second.
And also information on how we can obtain the recording for this. There was a ton of information in this, and I hope that we can obtain it. And also the chat, the information from the chat.
Yeah, hopefully, I mean, I see it's still recording now, so that's a good sign. Not quite sure how to record the chat, but I'll try.
There's a way to save chat. If you go to the bottom of the list of chats, at least on my computer, and some of you will see this, there's a little, on the far right corner, there's a little box with 3 dots in it.
Okay.
Okay, if you click on that, at any given time, it will save the chat in a file, in a folder on your computer.
Okay.
But it only saves what's currently there. It doesn't save into the future. So a good time to do that is right at the end.
Okay.
But yeah, when you close out of the Zoom session, at least again in my world, there's the folder is right there in front of you, and it's got this file in it with all the chat.
Yeah, I'll post it up on the Reverse Ritual website. I'll also put it in the link section of the Chicago Rudolf Steiner branch under the links section. I'll post the link for the video there as well. So do we want to close off and just say that we feel complete?
I found the Michael prayer if someone wanted to hear it.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
I don't know if someone else had a comment too that they were going to say before that, but okay, I guess I'll go. Okay, we must eradicate from the soul all fear and terror of what comes to us from the future. We must acquire serenity in all the feelings and sensations from out of the future. We must look forward with absolute equanimity to everything that may come, and we must think only that whatever comes to us is given by a world directive full of wisdom. It is part of what we have to learn to trust in that ever-present help of the spiritual world. Truly, nothing else will do if our courage is not to sustain us. And we remind ourselves every morning and every evening.
Thank you. Yeah, but you know what? I really, if Sally's still on the line here, I would really love to hear this Alice Walker poem to end, because I think it's just so powerful and so real. And I would really like to just, oh goodness, where are we?
I have a quick request too. Vanessa put a link to Otto Scharmer in the chat. Are you still here, Vanessa? I'd like to contact you because I'm trying to find all the Michael school who have taken ULab training and get together. So if you have my email address, please email me.
Great. Any other last thoughts before we end with this verse here?
I have a last thought.
Great.
I love that verse by Rudolf Steiner, and I really appreciate you reading that. Or I'm sorry, I forgot your name. But when I listened to that verse, I used to think, how do I do that? And now that I've been practicing certain things that Rudolf Steiner has left behind, exercises and science experiments, I'm doing it. And so I just wanted to say that there's this vast wealth of information on how we can do this. And it's free online. You can go to Rudolf Steiner archives. You can listen to the books on YouTube. And you can find out for yourself and experiment yourself to be able to hold that equanimity and have courage and see the future before it's actually manifest. Thank you so much, Hazel, for all of this.
Absolutely. Absolutely, Hazel. Thank you.
Friends, thank you for being here. We did take a nice long time. Thank you for being intrepid souls and sticking with us here. It's a beautiful conversation, and folks are right. We really do need to continue it somehow. So with that in mind, let's just round it off right here with this from Alice Walker.
Okay. We have a beautiful mother. Her hills are buffaloes, her buffaloes hills. We have a beautiful mother. Her oceans are wombs, her wombs oceans. We have a beautiful mother. Her teeth are the white stones at the edge of the water. The summer grasses, her plentiful hair. We have a beautiful mother. Her green lap immense, her brown embrace eternal, her blue body, everything we know.
Such a perfect image. You know, if we want to try to use our cognitive imagination to let that live in us, and I think many things will come forth for the good if we do that. So thank you everybody for this amazing session this afternoon. I'm just really grateful. It's been quite a trip, and I'm sure there's going to be reverberations of it out in the world. So thank you, friends, and we'll see you in night school, I guess, huh?
See you later. Bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Many blessings.
Hazel
Thank
and
you.
Linda. Oh, Hazel's gone. Rats. Okay, Linda, are you still there?
Yes.
Yeah, I wanted, this is entirely separate topic regarding, I put info in the chat regarding the 5th Gospel Study Group, and you sent me your email address. Does that mean that you'd like to be part of that?
Yeah, yeah. Could you send me information? I don't know if I can
Yeah,
always
it's
make it.
ongoing. We've been meeting for several weeks. Hazel is kind